following passage is an extract of The Great Gatsby, a novel by F. Scott Fitzgerald, who wrote it in the 1920s, a time of flappers, new ideals, and declining morals. This extract takes place in Chapter 4, after the first elaborate party that Nick has attended at Gatsby's mansion, where he had first met Gatsby. But this is an extract before Nick learns about the romantic history of Gatsby and Daisy. There are three major importances of this extract. This includes that it introduces Nick to the possibility that Gatsby is an immoral person. It displays the extent to which people go to get money on the east coast of America to Nick, and it also portrays Gatsby as less than great, which is only done a couple times throughout the entire novel. The first topic of discussion pertains to Nick Carraway, in that he is overly polite throughout the entire passage. This is shown in lines 1 and 2, line 21, and in line 28. In lines 1 and 2, Nick had just shook Meyer Wolfsham's hand, and because of Meyer Wolfsham's reaction, is wondering if he had offended him in some way. There's irony behind this, in that if he had actually offended Meyer Wolfsham, it would have probably been due to the fact that Nick has very high morals. In this society, almost nobody has high morals, and the fact that Nick does shows that he is very different from everybody else. And this may actually disgust Meyer Wolfsham. In line 21, Nick insisted on paying the check, even though Gatsby was a much richer person than Nick actually was. There are three possible reasons for this. The first being, of course, that he just has a very high moral standard and feels like he must say that he wants to pay the check. The second is that he is trying to make up for whatever he did that offended Meyer Wolfsham, kind of in a karma sort of way. And the third is that he is paying Gatsby back for the information that he had just provided Nick with about Meyer Wolfsham. Finally, Nick's politeness is shown in line 28, where he introduces both Gatsby and Tom before he even thinks about starting his own conversation with Tom. There are several possible reasons for why Nick is being as polite as he is being with everybody in this passage. The first is that he is trying to keep a part of his heritage as a Middle American, and that he doesn't want to just give up all that he has worked for his entire life in the first year that he has lived on the East Coast. The second reason is similar to muscle memory, in which it is just ingrained in his way of life and his way of thinking that you have to be polite and you have to use manners. The third, and probably the simplest, is that he just doesn't want to become one of the East Coast people, one that has very low morals, one that only thinks about money. And in this passage, as in the entire rest of the novel, he is distancing himself while still being a part of the society. He does this throughout the book as if he is a third party. This is a very good quality for him because he is acting as the author of the book. The second topic of discussion about Nick Carraway is similar to the first, and it is his high morals. He always believes that others are good until he is proven wrong. One example of this is when he is trying to find out what Meyer Wolfsham's profession is, and he asks if he is an actor, and then he asks if he is a dentist. He never assumes that Meyer Wolfsham is anything bad, and the only time that he actually finds that out is when Gatsby tells him that. Also, he never thought that someone could fix the World Series by themselves. He thought it was the end of a chain that was inevitable. And the fact that one person was able to pull off something like that, and one person would do something like that, and would have the lack of morals to do something like that to further themselves, he couldn't even fathom something as immense as that. Also in line 19, he seems to have a lot of faith in the justice system of New York, maybe a little bit too much faith in it. He believed that if a crime was committed, the criminal would be caught, the criminal would be tried, and the criminal would be sent to jail. And that there were no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But as he sees through the example of Meyer Wolfsheim, that is not always true. And sometimes the person that actually is responsible for something that tremendously illegal is not caught. The second character to be discussed is Gatsby, the actual protagonist of the novel. The entire passage can be seen as a foreshadowing of future events for Gatsby, split into two parts, the first being lines 1 to 20, where he seems to be in admiration of Meyer Wolfsheim. It is subtle admiration, but it is still there, as seen in line 4 and in line 20. In line 4, Gatsby compliments him as a denizen of Broadway, and seems to almost be looking up to him at that point. In line 20, Gatsby says that the police can't catch Meyer Wolfsheim because he is a smart man. This promotes criminal activity by saying that they're smart, and it also foreshadows that Gatsby is in fact a criminal himself because Gatsby had attended Oxford in the past. The second part that the foreshadowing of this passage can be split up into for Gatsby is lines 21 through 34, in which Tom and Gatsby have just met. And in this part, Gatsby is very embarrassed of being with Tom, and as shown in lines 29 and 30, which state that Gatsby has a strained, unfamiliar look of embarrassment on his face. This first shows that Gatsby is weak in this part of the novel, and it is the first time in the novel that Gatsby did not carry himself in his dignified manner, which had become almost trademark of him. Whenever you read about him up to this point in the novel, he always had an air about him. This embarrassment of being with Tom does two things. It first foreshadows the affair that Gatsby and Daisy will have in the future, and through Gatsby's weakness at this point, it also hints to the outcome of the dispute over Daisy. The third character and final character to be analyzed is Tom Buchanan. He's depicted as being very strong in this part of the novel, as shown when through the repetition of the word demanded in line 26 and 31. This shows that he is very forceful about how he conducts himself, and it also shows that he likes authority. This could hint to his relationship with Daisy and the fact that even though he is cheating on her, he won't allow her to cheat on him. In final analysis, the characters' actions in this passage allude to their future actions and the future consequences of those actions later on in the novel. In this passage, Nick never truthfully seems like he is fully part of what is going on, which is similar to the rest of the novel, where he never seems like he is actually integrating himself into the society. Gatsby's weakness in this passage, compared to Tom, shows that Gatsby couldn't win Daisy back from Tom, no matter what happened later on in the novel. Finally, Nick's depiction of Tom as demanding answers implies that, at least in the eyes of Nick, Tom is very strong and therefore unbeatable by Gatsby in his dispute over Daisy.